After a string of devastating defeats across Spain, the French forces under Marshal Soult launched a daring and desperate counterattack to halt the relentless Allied advance. This was the Battle of the Pyrenees, where towering mountain passes, fierce combat, and raw determination clashed in one of the most grueling campaigns of the Peninsular War. The French sought to relieve the besieged fortresses of San Sebastian and Pamplona and reclaim lost ground, but Allied strategy and tenacity would test them to their limits. This is the story of the French strike back. In the broader context of the Napoleonic Wars, 1813 was the year where the tide decisively turned against France. The Peninsular War, a fierce and protracted struggle on Spain and Portugal soil, had seen the French Empire suffer significant setbacks. On June 21, 1813, Wellington's Allied army dealt a crushing blow to Marshal Jourdan's French forces at the Battle of Vittoria. This victory effectively shattered France's hold over much of Spain, forcing a chaotic retreat northwards. Yet, even in retreat, the French resisted fiercely. Though stripped of large swaths of territory, they maintained key fortified cities, most notably San Sebastian on the Atlantic coast and Pamplona nestled on the edge of the Pyrenean range. These bastions represented the last thin thread between Napoleon's retreating armies and the invaders poised to cross into France itself. For the Allies, seizing control of these fortresses and the mountain passes that guarded the route into France was paramount. The rugged Pyrenees Mountains formed a formidable barrier, steeped in both natural defenses and strategic corridors that could either choke or facilitate an army's passage. The French emperor, unwilling to relinquish this vital frontier, appointed Marshal Nicolas-Jean de Soult to mount a powerful offensive to break through Allied defenses in the Pyrenees, relieve the besieged garrisons, and reverse France's fortunes in the Iberian Peninsula. It was a gamble marked by urgency and desperation. Failure would mean losing the Pyrenees funnel and pave the way for Allied forces to march unopposed into southern France. Success could turn the tide, buying Napoleon precious time and territory.
The Pyrenees are no ordinary mountain range. Stretching roughly 430 kilometers, 270 miles, between the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea, they form an imposing natural border between France and Spain. Towering peaks, treacherous cliffs, narrow river valleys, and a scattering of steep passes define their rugged character. For armies accustomed to rolling plains and predictable terrain, the Pyrenees posed crushing obstacles. Supply lines became tenuous threads stretched over narrow mountain paths. Troop movements were slowed by steep ascents, unreliable roads, and the capricious mountain weather, sudden storms, thick fogs, and icy temperatures high above sea level. Of critical importance were a handful of passes. Roncesvalles, Maya, and a few smaller routes formed the choke points through which whole armies had to funnel. Control of these passes meant control of movements between Spain and France in 1813. Marshal Soult meticulously planned his offensive around these narrow gateways. His strategy was to strike simultaneously through Roncesvalles Pass and Maya passes, break Allied defenses, and thrust into the valleys beyond to relieve San Sebastian and Pamplona. Opposing him stood Wellington, a commander well-versed in defensive warfare, especially against Napoleon's veterans. Wellington anticipated Soult's approach through the passes and deployed his forces in strong defensive positions, featuring a mix of hard-fighting British line and light infantry, seasoned Portuguese battalions, and disciplined Spanish troops. Both commanders understood intimately that in the unforgiving Pyrenees, the terrain would test their armies at least as harshly as the opposing soldiers. On July 25, 1813, Soult's plans took shape. He assembled an army numbering between 60,000 and 80,000 men, including fresh conscripts alongside veterans, bolstered but unsteady in supplies due to France's constrained logistics. The French offensive began with fierce assaults on multiple fronts. Roncesvalles Pass. Here, Soult led the attack against the British 4th Division and a division of Spanish soldiers. Throughout the day, Allied forces stubbornly resisted, inflicting and absorbing heavy casualties alike. But by dusk, relentless pressure and superior French numbers compelled the British and Spanish to tactically withdraw across the pass, preserving their forces for future defense. Maya Pass. Almost simultaneously, a hardened French corps attacked the British 2nd Division entrenched in Maya Pass. The British met the onslaught with fierce determination, conducting volley after volley of musketry from the steep heights. Despite heavy losses and intense fighting, the French succeeded in forcing a British withdrawal by evening, though at considerable cost. Other engagements. Smaller French columns assaulted minor passes and valleys, probing Allied lines and further adding chaos to the mountainous battlefield. While Soult's troops achieved initial tactical successes, the very mountains they sought to dominate disrupted their momentum. Supply shortages, rugged terrain slowing advance, and fierce Allied counterattacks began to stall the offensive.
Recognizing the critical threat posed by Soult's advance, Wellington swiftly reinforced his positions. By July 28th, the Allied army had regrouped north of Pamplona to meet the French surge head-on at Sororan Ridge. The Battle of Sororan, fought over several days, became the keystone of the campaign. Wellington's forces, now consisting of British, Portuguese, and Spanish regiments, established formidable defensive positions high on the rugged slopes. The fighting here was especially brutal and sustained. French divisions launched repeated assaults with desperate hand-to-hand combat amid rocky outcrops and narrow ridges. Each French attack was met by disciplined musket fire, bayonet charges, and resilient Allied volleys. Historians rank this defense as one of Wellington's finest. The success at Sororan was vital in halting Soult's momentum, showcasing skillful use of terrain, coordinated infantry action, and effective artillery support. Despite their valor, the French found themselves increasingly outmatched, running low on supplies, battered by losses, including many officers, and confronting an enemy solidified in well-chosen fortified positions. Wounded in spirit and diminished in strength, Marshal Soult faced a critical choice. Rather than retreat northeast along the Roncesvalles Pass, where Allied forces had fortified their positions, he shifted his attempts north towards the Bidassoa River Valley, seeking a safer route back to France. July 30th saw Wellington pursue and press the French rearguards at Sororan. Vigorous skirmishing forced some French units northeast into difficult terrain, while the bulk of Soult's army maneuvered northwards. Over the following days, smaller engagements followed in quick succession. French forces braced for final withdrawal, while Allied troops aimed to encircle and prevent escape. The final significant clash came near the town of Echallar in early August. Despite French tenacity, Allied pressure and overwhelming firepower forced Soult's army to retreat across the mountains, narrowly escaping encirclement but suffering further attrition. In the span of less than 2 weeks, the French offensive was decisively halted. Soult's army, once a proud strike force, limped back over the border, shattered and demoralized, having failed to relieve the besieged French fortresses.
Beyond the grand strategies and shifting lines lay the human reality of mountain warfare. Soldiers from both sides faced brutal physical conditions day after day. Baking sun turned to chilling nights, scarce food slowed movements, and steep, uneven paths strained horses and men alike. Average infantrymen endured hard marches with heavy packs, often sleeping exposed on rocky ground under thin blankets. Meanwhile, artillery units struggled to bring cumbersome cannons over rugged trails. Amid hardship, stories of bravery and endurance shone through. British light infantry and Portuguese sharpshooters gained reputations for agile, deadly skirmishing in the craggy terrain. French grenadiers and veterans fought doggedly, often in waves against fortified hills, refusing to yield despite mounting casualties. Marshal Soult's leadership was also tested. Exhaustion weighed on him heavily during critical moments. Anecdotes describe him taking brief rests to regain strength, while his officers voiced frustrations at the mountain terrain's unrelenting demands on morale and effectiveness. The mountain climate and topography proved as formidable an enemy as the Allied army. These human aspects of the campaign remind us that beyond strategy, warfare is a matter of endurance, resilience, and sacrifice on the ground. The Battle of the Pyrenees was among the costliest campaigns of the Peninsular War summer of 1813. Estimates suggest French casualties numbered around 13,000 men, killed, wounded, or captured, with over 400 officers among the losses. The Allies sustained approximately 7,000 casualties, but maintained cohesion and momentum. Soult failed in his primary objectives. The besieged fortresses of San Sebastian and Pamplona remained in Allied hands. The French retreat marked the last major French offensive in Spain, signaling a decisive shift towards Allied domination. For Wellington, the victory was strategic as well as symbolic. It sealed control of the northern mountain frontier, removed the last major French obstacle on Spanish soil, and laid a secure foundation for crossing into French territory, the ultimate goal of the 1813 campaign. In the grand maneuvering of the Napoleonic Wars, the Battle of the Pyrenees thus stands as a key precursor to the invasion of France, representing the transition of combat from peninsular soil to the French heartland. The Battle of the Pyrenees stands as a stark reminder of war's bitter reality, where strategic plans collide with daunting terrain and human will is tested under fire. The French strike back in 1813 was fierce and determined, but ultimately unsuccessful against an equally resolute Allied defense. If you've enjoyed this journey into one of the Peninsular War's pivotal mountain battles, be sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the great conflicts that shaped our world's history. Join us next time as we continue unraveling the stories of courage, strategy, and sacrifice that defined the Napoleonic Age.